What's up, everybody? It's Kelpsy, and today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about Update 43. So we're going to start with one major point. If you are here to see if there's any changes in, any major changes that's coming to combat or PvP or anything like that, the answer is no. There are small buffs and debuffs coming to weapons, coming to classes, especially like I'm on right now. The Necromancer is getting a lot of changes, but for the most part there is no major changes, so don't worry about that. Now we're going to talk about the thing that has everybody riled up right now, right off the gate, and it is housing tours. So this was the big announcement. This is the big look at us, this is what we're doing. And basically it's a drop down tab in your group finder, and it has the ability to go check out people's houses. That's it. Now, I listed my house on here so I can see what it looks like. You can browse home by the house, by tags of like the vibe of your house, or you can search the user ID. And as you can see, I set it to the Alien Ruins, and there's me and someone else, and I'm guessing these are just other people that are in the public test realm. They're checking this out, so this is what it looks like. A lot of people don't like this. I personally do, and not because I care about what other people's houses look like, even though, as you can see, I am a furnishing nerd. The reason I like it is now I'm just going to use random people's houses for their crafting tables, because I'm going to vote a guild house to be one of the premier houses in the game, so everyone has access to that and Mundastems. Easy peasy. But other than that, what they're bringing to the table as well is they're bringing us mount previews. So now, instead of it just showing you what the mount looks like, it shows you what you look like that, what it looks like with its little inventory stuff, what it looks like moving, barking, you know, a better composition so you can see what it looks like. You can see, you know, like how awkward the horses look running in this game, because it's been a decade they haven't figured out how horses move, because that just, I mean, come on, we have dynamic movement on everybody else and the horses still run so stiff. But either way, they're making changes to luminous ink drops. We are getting added scribing skills. There's a lot of that to unpack, so we're not going to get too deep into that, because we're going to get deep into the patch notes about the classes. But other than those two things, the big part I'm excited about is we're going to get curated Undaunted shoulder chests. So instead of spending 5 keys and you getting a shot between the 3 weights of 2 different sets, now whatever you don't have, it's going to drop. So the worst case scenario, if you need like the light slime craw shoulders, the worst case scenario, you're going to have to try 6 times, and on the 6th time you're guaranteed that light drop, which is phenomenal for me because I have the worst RNG in Elder Scrolls history. And that that curated drop is going to be across several things. It's going to be in that. It's going to be in the PvP chests, they said. They didn't explicitly say which ones. I'm assuming it's going to be the rewards for the worthy chests, or like maybe the battle ribbon chest you get for completing a daily from him. I'm not 100% sure which is going to be, but doing that will definitely drive down the price of some of those sets, which will be nice. I've heard talks that eventually they're going to implement it into Imperial City, which is really going to absolutely demolish how I make my gold, but I'll complain about that later. One thing that I wanted to show, like in person, that they're adding in with the new update is you can go in, guild store, pick the guild that you're going to go into. So we'll do this. And then it says Dominion Imperial Guard, you leave. Come back, guild store, back in the same guild store. So they're making it so that it saves the last page you're on, which is great, because if you're dumb like I am, you've accidentally listed things in the wrong non-trading guild a million times. This is going to help stop that. Just easy quality of life. Does the same with guild banks. It'll open up the same guild bank over and over and over. So that is one quality of life they are adding in the upcoming update that I'm excited about. But other than those, the big changes now that we're going to talk about are the class changes. And I'm going to start with this guy right here, the Necromancer. And I wanted to start with him because the Necromancer is getting the most changes by far. So first thing we're going to talk about is, number one, you no longer can create corpses outside of combat. Now, this sounds like a debuff, which it is, to the Necromancer, which I really don't know why they would have even do this, because the Necromancer's already been in such a rough spot for so long. But now, since I'm not in combat, I don't get a corpse. So that's rough. Now that we've got that part out of the way, let's talk about the good things. Start with one, Boneyard. Boneyard now gives minor vulnerability, which it did not previously. And the vulnerability continues on if you switch it to Unnerving. As you can see, it gives minor vulnerability and increasing damage taken by 5% for 4.1 seconds each tick. Now, does that stack? Does that stack? Does that just mean it refreshes? I'm not totally for sure. It looks like it's just refreshing on the Ogrim, but that is a massive AoE that gives minor vulnerability, and that's going to be great for PvP. Now, on top of that, I'd like to say that with that giving minor vulnerability, they took it away from the Bone Totem. But now, with the Agony Bone Totem, and it might be... yeah, all of the Bone Totems, they now are afflicted with Major Cowardice, which reduces their weapon and spell damage by 430, which is a massive buff. So that's phenomenal, and I personally think that them switching the minor vulnerability to Unnerving to Boneyard is fantastic, because I prefer that, and with that tick where it sticks on them when they leave the AoE, I like that too. So I think both of those are a good thing. They are giving us Shocking Siphon, now gives Major Savagery and Prophecy for 20 seconds, another phenomenal buff to the Necromancer. The Magical Blast Bones now gives us, well, it's not that it gives us anything else. Now we can cast it outside of combat. So now, if you're a Necro Bomber, you can now buff up before bombing without having to enter combat, which is, again, a phenomenal extra to the Necromancer, who's been in just dire straits for quite a long time. The Grave Grasp, it got a buff in the morph of Ghostly Embrace, because it didn't used to do damage, and now it will do damage. So that's really nice. They're letting it start doing damage, because we all know that the Necromancer needs more damage. Now, that is, I think, all the differences that are coming to the Necromancer. Now, we're going to talk about a few other things that are changing. All right. So, for the Nightblade, the big change for the Nightblade is they moved around Veiled Strike, Surprise Attack, that morph, and Blur. So Blur is now in Shadow. Surprise Attack is now in Assassination. Now this makes it so that the Refreshing Shadows, which got a good buff, or no, Shadow Barrier got a buff, yeah. So this gave Shadow Barrier the buff so that it goes up by 12 seconds, and this goes up for each piece of heavy armor equipped by 2 seconds. So right now my buff would be 18 seconds, and that gets activated by Mirage or Dark Cloak, which is fantastic, and the fact that it scales now with heavy armor, which is going to make the Nightblade tank much more viable. And I don't know why Blur was in Assassination for so long. It should have been Shadow this whole time, so that just makes sense. Funnel Health will now, we'll add that in there. Funnel Health will now heal 2 additional targets, so you'll be able to heal 3 people. So that is great for if you're going to be a dungeon Nightblade healer. And that's actually all of the differences that's going to be coming to the Nightblade. So Nightblade's not getting anything buff, debuff, things like that. It's going to have a little bit change in the passives due to your spammable no longer proccing. Because before, our spammable, the surprise attack, when it was in shadow, it would proc that shadow barrier, giving us major resolve. But that no longer will be happening. So if you are someone who pays a lot of attention to that, make sure that you remember that that will no longer proc off of this come the patch. Now, a debuff that people are not going to be very happy about, but this is the only change that's coming to it. This is for the Arcanist. The flail is no longer going to get a scaling execute. It has been is getting taken out. So as you can see, number one, the flail heal is getting changed so that you have to do damage. Whereas before there was like a bug or just a way to abuse it so that it would just heal you a little bit. Now it has to do damage. If an enemy is hit, you heal for 37 per health once per cast. So there's no like group heal from hitting a bunch. There's no spamming it. It's just you have to hit someone. It heals you one time per that. And it is no longer an execute. It still gives the Abyssal Ink. It still immobilizes. It still does a good amount of damage, but it no longer does that. And now the other form, the dread form of it, not the flail, but the dread version, it will now do 33% more damage per crux used. So if you use all 3 crux, it'll be doing 99% extra damage. So they're just trying to regulate that out. But that is the only change coming to the Arcanist, although I think it's a big change because that is a major player in PvP. All right, so another class here on the Warden that is going to have a couple, as I perceive them as major changes, is number one, they're changing Arctic Blast. So Arctic Blast, from now on, so typically when you would cast it, it would have an initial heal, and then it would pulse and do damage and stun those around you. So now it will no longer give an initial heal. If no enemies are stunned, you'll heal for 4,200 health. But if someone is stunned, you will not heal at all. So it is lowering the damage tick, but I think they listed it somewhere around 21% per tick. So it's not like a huge downgrade, but it's a pretty big downgrade. And they're lowering the chances of the chill from down to 10% from 15%. And the initial chance of chill is 25%. So it's not awful, but it is a pretty big change, and it is no longer a heal unless you're completely alone. So if you're planning on 1vxing, you have to run Polar Wind, even though that's what I ran anyways. Now, the other big one is Piercing Cold. So after the patch, it's going to be different because now if you have over 30,000 health, it's going to mitigate, it's going to let you block more damage, up to 12%. But if you have under 30,000 health, it increases your damage done by 8%. So that is nice because now it's going to give you, if you want to be tankier, you can be tanky. And if you want to be more damagey, you can do damage. Now for PvP, this is really going to throw a wrench in some gears due to everyone playing the Warden and its popularity being you can be tanky and still hit hard, thanks to the Winter's Embrace line. So this is going to change that up a bit, but I don't think it's going to make that bad of a difference. But I do think it's going to be enough to cause a little bit of a change in PvP for the Warden. But I don't think it's that bad. I think the Warden's gotten off pretty easy. All right. Now, for the Sorcerer, sadly, there's no debuffs coming their way. The only changes they're getting is now your Daedric Curse will be doing, you'll do initial damage, and it does the full damage to all targets near it. So this is going to be a good buff for heavy attack sorcerers. And according to the patch notes, it's also going to make your pets focus who you cursed. Now, whether that's going to work out or not, I can't tell you, but that's what the patch note says, that now, instead of it doing half damage to all surrounding enemies, it's going to do full damage to all surrounding enemies, and your pets are going to focus them. And the one difference now is that now you're going to be able to block this attack. So if you have your block up, when it hits, it'll block it. You'll mitigate the damage instead of like previously where you just took it. So that's nice. But that is the only change coming to the Sorcerer. Alright, so finally, our last class that we're talking about is going to be the Templar. The Templar is getting very minor changes. So number one, for Radiant Destruction, they are fixing a visual bug on the animation, which I haven't seen, but I also don't main the Templar, so I don't know. But also now your Flare is going to give you your one major buff. The first one, it's going to go for 10 seconds instead of 5, and then Empower is getting lengthened to 12 seconds. So that's the only changes the Templar is getting, which is a shame because I feel like the Templar is a class they have forgotten about for quite a long time now. Alright, now there are two things that I want to touch on that I feel are going to be huge for PvP. Number one, the Vampirism. They have absolutely slashed how much Undeath does. Now it's only going to give you a damage reduction of 10% if you have both upgrades and 5% if you have one. Now granted, this only works, so previously it only worked if you were Vampire Stage 3, which notice red eyes, play PvP, why I'm Stage 3. In fact, he might be, yeah, Stage 3. So previously that was up to 30%. So they have slashed this. Now also, as you can see, it no longer requires a stage. So you can be stage 1 and have a lot less negative effects and still have the Undeath passive, which is nice, but I personally don't think it's going to be as worth it as it was with the 30% Undeath. So this is going to change PvP a lot, and I'm pretty excited to see what happens. And one other thing that's been going on for a while, so weakness to elements, the other version, elemental susceptibility, this is no longer going to take people out of stealth. That was the only reason I personally used it, and they said explicitly in the patch notes it's no longer going to break stealth on people, so that's going to be a big change as well. But so Vampirism, I feel like, is going to be the biggest change in the game. Everything else is going to, like, there's a few quality of life things, but for the most part, I think this is going to be the part that's, like, the biggest aspect, is changing how much damage is dropped off from the Undeath passive. Because previously, it was basically like you were getting the Pariah set by just being a vampire. But now, that's not the case. So, whether that's going to continue to be the meta or not, I could not tell you, but I'm pretty excited to see it. Let me know what you guys think about Update 43. Are you excited about it? Are you mad about it? Do you like the idea of housing tours, or are you with the majority where you think housing tours is a wasted effort and we should have focused on doing something for the long forgotten PvP of the game that they seem to think that we don't need anything? Let me know how you guys feel. And as always, thanks for the support. Thanks for coming out, watching the video, showing some love, and I will see you guys next time.